another video or another episode on life lessons with ChildLine's Outreach Officer. I'm Aaron George, ChildLine Outreach Officer, and today we're going to have a little conversation, or we're going to talk about the rights of a child. But before we talk about child rights, let's talk a little bit about um, ChildLine, who's ChildLine, what's ChildLine, and what services are available at ChildLine. So, ChildLine is a non governmental organization that is there to protect young persons and their rights. Our target audience would be persons under the age of 25 years old, but we do assist persons above the age of 25 years old on a number of issues once they're relating to or affecting a child. We have three main services. The first main service is called the helpline, and it's available 24/7, which means that it's available all day, all night. And it's a a telephone that we encourage persons to call and talk about any issues that they may be experiencing. So, and it's free of charge as well. The two phone numbers 800-4321 or 131. That's to get in contact with the helpline, and everything that is said on the helpline is confidential. The second part of Childline is called the outreach unit, and that's where officers like myself, we usually would go to schools to facilitate workshops on psychosocial issues, things like bullying, anger management, puberty, and to raise awareness about children rights and so on. And the third part of Childline is the counseling unit, and this is where persons can receive mental health and psychosocial support. So, in a nutshell, that's Childline. It's available there. There's a misconception that the organization only deals with child abuse cases. No, that isn't true. Anything at all relating to a child or affecting a young person, we want to be there to provide you all with that level of assistance. Yeah. So for today's conversation is going to be about the rights of a child, and the rights of a child, generally, whenever a person hears the rights of a child, what they may think about would be the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, or the UNCRC. And so, what is this? What is this UNCRC that persons may think about whenever they hear child rights? It's essentially a legally binding international agreement that sets out the civil, political, the economic, the social, and the cultural rights of every single child, regardless of their age, their race, their nationality, their abilities, regardless of what. Once you're a child, and a child based on the convention is defined as a person under the age of 18 years old, um, you would the guidelines or the protocols in this convention would apply to you. So who essentially is involved in this United Nations Convention, so to speak. Uh, Several countries, over 100, close to 200 countries have already signed on to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, um, which means that all of these countries agree with the guidelines or the protocols that have been identified, and they also agree that the governments of the country agree that they are going to work to ensure that children are not deprived of any of their rights. So, what does the CNCRC really talk about? It is essentially a document, and it consists of 54 articles that set out the children's rights and how governments must actually work together to ensure that all of the rights that children have or all that they need is made available to them. So, under the terms of the convention, governments are actually required to make sure they meet the children's basic needs and to help them essentially reach their fullest potential. Uh, so central to this is the acknowledgement that every single child has fundamental rights, and this is where you would have things like a right to life, a right to an education, which we will talk about a little bit more shortly. But just to capture a full understanding of the convention first, so you have that first listing or that first protocol there that explains or that highlights the 54 articles. And in 2000, there was actually two optional protocols included in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, and one of them was asking governments to ensure that persons under the age of 18 years old, they are not forcibly recruited into the armed forces. The second asks for states to or all countries to ensure that there's a prohibition associated with child prostitution, child pornography, and the sale of children into slavery. Over 120 countries have ratified that um, aspect of that particular protocol within the convention. And in 2011, there was actually a third optional protocol that was added. And this is the one that enables children whose rights have been violated to complain directly to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. So essentially, the first aspect or the first set of protocols, which would highlight the 54 articles, you'd have the biggest buying or the largest buying with almost 200 countries accepting that these are 54 rights or that children should have, and that governments are going to actually ensure that they put things in place so that they have these things. The other protocols that were added, as in optional protocol 1, 2, and 3, that I just mentioned, some countries that have agreed to the first part of the protocol have not agreed to that part of the protocol. But of course, it varies with country to country. Yeah. So just to talk a little bit more about child's rights, or what are like, when you hear child rights, most people hear or they think about a right to an education, and of course that is a fundamental right that children have. But I'm going to take it from the top. Number one, we're not going to go through all of the rights, because to go through all 54, it will be quite a bit. But at the same time, of course, you could do a quick Google search for the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and there are many documents that you could get from like ChildLine or UNICEF, that would highlight in a child-friendly way, explain the rights of children, because in some documents it is very complicated, but in other documents it could be very simple. So it all depends on the audience and the nature of use that you have for the child, right? But at the end of the day, what is stated in the convention remains the same. So number one, it says that it defines who a child is, and it says that everyone under the age of 18 years old has rights. The second listing, or the second article, says that all children have these rights, no matter who they are, where they live, what their parents do, what language they speak. It doesn't matter their religion, what their cultural experience is like, if they are a boy, if they are a girl, um, whether they are rich, if they're poor. No child should be treated unfairly on any basis. That's essentially the second article. The third article says that all adults should do what is best for you. So when adults make decisions, they have to actually do what is in the best interest of a child, or they have to think about how the decisions that they make can impact a child. For example, doing drugs in the person's presence, or simple things like moving. What are the implications can this have for the child that might be present? The fourth convention, or the fourth article, states that the government has the responsibility to make sure that your rights are protected. They must help your family protect your rights, and they must create an environment where you can grow and you can reach your full potential. So that will probably explain to some extent why there are a number of social services in place for families that may not be able to meet basic needs. For example, for parents who may one single parent households where you just have one person working, probably the other parent may have died. There are social services in place where children could receive money from the government to assist with life's expenses. The fifth article says that your family has the responsibility to help you learn and to exercise your rights, and to ensure that your rights are met. You have a right to be alive, which means that you have a right to access the necessary healthcare that can keep you alive. And it is a breach of the law if adults around you know that you're not feeling well or know that a child is feeling sick and they don't do what needs to be done or don't provide them with the necessary medical or psychological care. We also, if you look at article number 7, it says that you have a right to a name. Yeah? All persons have a right to a name. Nobody should be calling you a boy or a girl or anything, or any derogatory name. You are entitled to a name. That you will be referred to, and no one can take that away from you. Yeah, the name that you're given. You also have a right to live with your parents at the end of the day, unless it is bad for you, of course. You have the right to live with a family that will care for you. The ninth article would state that you have a sorry, the 10th article, the ninth one is that you would have a right to live with your parents. The 10th is that you, if you live in a different country from your parents, you have the right to be together in the same place. So this speaks a little bit to probably immigration or to refugees, where if your parents are in another country, you are entitled to go to that country and to be with them at the very least. You have a right to be protected from kidnapping. And of course, there are many other rights, but to talk about some of the more general rights, you have a right to clothes, you have a right to food, you have a right to an education, so must go to school. You have a right to be protected from harm. You also have a right to play and to rest. You have a right to be raised by your parents if it's possible for them to raise you. You have a right to special care if you cannot live with your parents. There are also articles in the convention that speak about how refugee children should be treated like children in the countries that they now reside in. You also have the right to legal assistance or fair treatment in the justice system as it relates to your rights as an individual. So if you can't afford a lawyer, one would be given to you. Yeah. You have a right to not experience punishment that is too harsh. And as much as and the thing is, it's really important for us to sometimes go through the articles and read out the rights to our children. And sometimes parents or adults on the whole may feel a bit concerned when they think about children having rights because they feel like if children are going to become rude and they're going to use it as a tool or as a weapon to exploit parents, so to speak. But grander scheme of things, essentially what we want to think of the convention as a guideline for parents and it's a guideline for children because with the rights comes responsibilities and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the rights basically is just a reminder that children should not be ill treated or they should not be taken advantage of. They have a right to food, to clothing, to a safe place to live, and to have their basic needs met. They should not be in a disadvantaged environment where, and if it's possible for things to change, parents or the persons taking care of them must do what must take the necessary steps to protect them. Yeah. So those are some of the rights. So I strongly suggest for the children that are listening, please do a quick Google search and you can do it with your parents and check out some of your rights because knowing what your rights are at the end of the day is going to be one of the most powerful tools that you have in terms of daily functioning on the whole. But the thing is, with your rights comes responsibilities. Yeah, definitely comes responsibilities. So let's talk a little bit about responsibilities essentially, like what is a responsibility. Responsibility is more or less the part that the child has to play because we as the adults would provide or offer or give you your basic needs, but you have to do uh your part, so to speak. So it takes two hands to clap. um for example, what are some of the responsibilities that you have and how they may be connected to your rights? You have a right to an education, but you have a responsibility to go to school and to learn. And going to school doesn't mean just going to school for going to school's sake. It means being there on time, wearing the school uniform, being fed in school, and that's why there's a school feeding system as well. Because what if a parent may not have enough money based on the job that they have to be able to send their children to school and to make sure that they have all the food that they need. Um, this is where the government steps in, and there's a school feeding program, for example, in Trinidad, where children can register, and on a daily basis, breakfast and lunch would be sent to the school, and the child could at least have their basic needs met when it comes to food. Yeah. Sometimes they may send a drink, or the school may provide them with a bottle of water. But you have a responsibility to learn when it comes to your education. You can't expect that your parents are spending the money to buy the books, buy the school uniform, buy the book bag, buy the school shoes, send you to school. They made sure they register you in school, and then you go to school and you play all day. Yes, you have a right to play, but you also have a right to have that balance in life as well. Yes, you also have a right to uh, take care of your own body, or an obligation to look after your well-being. So let's associate it with food. Yes, you have a right to have food, but you also have a responsibility to eat healthy. And your parents can't force you to eat the things that you eat. At the end of the day, they may encourage you, but it is up to you what you choose to consume. Of course, the older you get is the more responsibilities that you will have just as adults. But at the same time, there are still limits to what you should and shouldn't do. And keeping in mind that taking care of yourself doesn't just mean that you're going to eat the right things, it also means that you're going to um, practice proper hygiene. So you're going to wash your hands before you're eating. It's not just because COVID-19 or coronavirus is upon us and there's a scare about the pandemic that we now start washing our hands. No, we need to wash our hands nonetheless. Like things like bathing, washing, making sure that your school uniform is taken care of, so that because not every day mommy and daddy could purchase these things. So you have a responsibility to keep your things safe. You also have a responsibility to if something is not if your body is feeling ill, or some part of you is aching, you need to let your parents know what is going on, so that they could tell you, or they could seek the necessary treatment for you. If you don't say something, then nothing is going to come out of it. Yeah, you have a right to be the best. You have a responsibility to be the best person that you could be at the end of the day. You have a right to take care of your own body, and you also have a right to respect others. So you have a right to speak, or you have a right to be heard. And to be heard doesn't mean that you just have to talk. It could be done through song, it could be through dance, it could be through poetry, any method that you see fit. Of course, you definitely could you explore it, but at the same time, you have a right or responsibility to listen to others, and they have the right to also talk or to be heard. So it goes hand in hand. It you have to take, it's a give and a take. You could talk, the other person has to listen, and when you're listening, the other person will be talking. Yeah, it's just about finding that balance and understanding that it's not about you entirely, and the convention doesn't just give you power to do whatever it is you want to do. um, you have a responsibility to follow rules that have been set, and this is not just by your parents, but rules at school and rules at the community level, because after all, they are there for your safety and to protect our rights. And if we don't take responsibility for our actions at point in time, adults are not going to be able to help us. So we have to work with the adults, and we have to practice the proper behaviors, so that at the end of the day, we when we get older, or when we pass the age of 18 years old, we understand the fundamentals of interactions that take place between people, or the codes of conduct between persons. And we also have we have a right to practice our religion, or practice our cultures. And here in Trinidad and Tobago, we are a very, very diverse population. We have a melting pot of cultures. We have persons of various backgrounds, and all are free to express their religion and their practices and their beliefs openly. And it is your responsibility to respect that, even if their views or their choices, because of whatever doctrine they follow, you have to respect it even though you may not agree with it necessarily. Yeah, so it's about, again, finding that balance. And when we don't accept responsibility, there are going to be a lot of consequences. For example, number one, well, I touched on this already. When you don't accept responsibility, other people lose their rights, and not just in terms of the things that we do or the things that we say, but how we treat other people and how we make them feel. For example, bullying. Bullying is a major violation of human rights where persons are called all sorts of names. And that's verbal bullying, but you should be referred to by the name that you're given to. You have a right to be called by that name. You also have a right to be free from protection. Sorry, to be free from harm and to be protected. And if other persons in a compound or at school or at home, they are hurting you, hitting you, kicking you, fighting with you constantly, of course, there is going to be some perception of unfairness or abuse, and it means that your environment is unsafe, and essentially that means that your rights are not being respected. So when we don't take responsibility for our actions, we put other people in these situations. Also, it is unfair because other people have to do a job, and it that's not necessarily another person's responsibility. For example, if, let's say, at home you have a everyone has a responsibility to wash their own dishes, but you decide that you're constantly going to rest your plate down and you're not going to wash your bit of the dishes, or you're not going to assume your responsibility, and then flies come in and ants come in, and and everybody in the household feels uncomfortable because of your actions, that's unfair. Yeah, so that's another consequence if you don't accept your responsibility. Generally speaking as well, persons can become less successful, and what can happen is they may feel less inclined to go for their goals. Why? And let me give an example. Because persons, they may feel like other people are always trying to fight them down or always trying to keep them away from a particular uh, group, and in so doing, by depriving a person of their rights, you make them feel like, okay, what is the point in me trying to achieve something new or something great if at the end of the day other persons are just going to be able to snatch it away from me or take it away from me. Yeah, so if we have this do unto others as you have them do unto you kind of mentality, it avoids that type of conflict. People could feel unsafe or they could feel unhappy because they're being teased or because they're being hurt. If you don't accept responsibility as well, people could be very selfish and they could be uncaring. They might not ever know the good feeling that people get when they share or when they care about other people, and that's unfortunate. Sometimes you won't care about your own belongings or those of others if you are lacking responsibility, and if you don't have that basic care or basic regard for your own things or for other people's things, then you're going to be putting other people's parents in expense, because, or you might even put yourself in some problems because of that disregard for property. So you might steal. Yeah, so, or you might just damage things that other people have. You might find it very difficult as well to get along with others, and sometimes you may find it hard to make friends if you're a person who can be a bit on the aggressive side when it comes to a child and their rights. So, in a nutshell, that is some of the information associated with child rights. And like I said, there are 54 articles in the convention, so it is up to you to probably get yourself acquainted with it so that you, and if you're an adult, ask yourself, have I done anything that could actually be violating the rights of a child? And what are some of the things that we can do to show that we are allowing them to express themselves, or that we're expressing their right, respecting their rights? For example, sometimes we say that we want children to be heard, and they say things like, your food not tasting good. that you may not want them to express their rights in those moments, but it's about finding the balance that, yes, at the end of the day, I have a right to say something, or I have a right to be honest. If I don't think it's nice, I don't think it's nice, but we don't have to be disrespectful in the way that we give our feedback or our criticism. We could be very respectful. So it's not what you say, but it's how you say it. Yeah. um, so, in a nutshell, that is the video on child rights. So, keep in mind that, of course, ChildLine is there to assist at any point in time. And, of course, there are consequences that are associated if persons intentionally violate the rights of children as well as unintentionally. Um, so, be aware, be in the know, find out, take a read of the convention. It may seem a bit lengthy, but there are a lot of uh, those versions that are concise, and they made a lot of child-friendly versions, because at the end of the day, it is a document that we want children to be able to understand the content associated with it. Yeah. So that is it on child rights. Keep in mind that ChildLine is available 24/7, at least the helpline. But you could always call 800-4321 for more information on the rights of a child, or if you think that a certain behavior may be violating their rights, you could call to find out about alternative actions that could be taken. We also have the outreach videos or the outreach activities that are taking place online. So please stay abreast of those things, and you would know everything that we have coming up by keeping up with our social media pages. You can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at ChildLine TT. We also have our website at, you can visit us www.childlinett.org, and on the website there's a feature for chatting. So if you don't necessarily want to call somebody to talk, you could, text. Yeah, if you fit to send a message instead, you could do that, and you could chat with a professional and get the assistance that you might need. And of course, we have the helpline that is there 24/7. So that brings me to the end of today's video. Please share it around, be mindful of child rights, and have a wonderful day.